So everybody knew what a firestorm was. The Germans had some interesting views on it. The guy here with a really impressive beard is Admiral Alfred von Tirpitz, who was instrumental in building up, instrumental in creating the pre-war German Navy. And he offered an opinion: single bombs from flying machines are wrong. They are odious when they hit and kill old women. If, however, one could set fire to London in 30 places, then what in a small way is odious would retire before something fine and powerful. The other German view on firestorms comes from two stanzas from a German children's song. Fly, Zeppelin, fly. England shall be destroyed by fire. From the very beginning, the first Zeppelin raid on London, they tried, it was an incendiary raid. 70% of the bombs dropped on London during 1915 were incendiary bombs. It turned out, however, that you needed them clustered geographically, and that the lines of them that would have been dropped by a Zeppelin moving overhead were not sufficient to start a firestorm. I walked the route in London of this very first Zeppelin raid on London, in the Stoke Newington area, and took that picture of the first house, first building in London ever hit by an aerial bomb. It was hit by an incendiary bomb, and the incendiary bomb, which is in the picture there, is already burned out. They were covered. These cylinders were wrapped in rope that was soaked in tar, so they would burn for quite a while. This particular bomb, the one in the picture, fell in the rafters of that house and started burning. The people who lived there were Mr. and Mrs. A.E. Lovell. They had two children who were home at the time, and they had two lady visitors. They were all able to get out without being killed. Although the lady visitors did have a few anxious moments because it was at night, and the key that was in their door fell out, and they had trouble finding it so they could unlock their door and escape the house. Mr. Lovell bicycled to the local fire brigade, and they came and put the fire out, which is why it still stands today. My understanding is that in recent times, they have put a historical marker on this house as being the first place in London that was ever hit by an aerial bomb. But there wasn't one there when I was there 20 years ago. So, this was the Zeppelin raids in 1915 were the first attempt at creating a firestorm in London. The second attempt was conducted in the fall of 1917 by Gotha bombers. Gotha bombers were German twin-engine bombers that were based in occupied Belgium. They flew across the Channel and dropped bombs on London and in other parts of southeast England. The worst incendiary attack occurred on the 6th of December. Gothas dropped 267 incendiaries and 9 high explosive bombs. They started 52 fires, but only 2 of them were large. Ultimately, they were not able to start a firestorm or even do very much damage. 10 years later, there was an interesting piece written by a German army officer, a Major von Bülow, who wrote, "A great deal of time was spent on the design of these incendiary bombs, with such high hopes for their effect on the densely populated London area. The bomb was a complete failure. The sound idea of creating panic and disorder by numbers of fires came to nothing." Fortunately, there was not a third attempt, because by 1918, the Germans had actually created an incendiary bomb that would have worked very well. The bombs they created were about the size of fat road flares. They were 1 kilogram magnesium bombs. They would burn for a quarter of an hour, and you couldn't quench them by putting water on them because it was a magnesium fire. They would put groups of 500 of them in any one go-to bomber, and they'd have a whole group of go-to bombers that they could have sent to London with these things, and they could have started innumerable fires in London. The Germans considered making firestorm attacks on London and Paris simultaneously with these bombs in August 1918, and then they considered it again in September 1918. The plan was that they would devastate huge sections of each capital city, and they just planned to keep sending them every night until they ran out of planes and ran out of bombs. It would have been catastrophic. Ludendorff, General von Ludendorff, wrote about this attempt in his memoirs. He said they expected to recreate the Great Fire of London of 1666, which resulted in them redesigning much of the city because so much was destroyed. He called off the raid, he said, for humanitarian purposes. It turned out that they called off the raid as the pilots were warming up their planes. Another 15 minutes, half an hour, they would have had large numbers of planes heading towards London and Paris with these incendiaries with no way to call them back. Ludendorff said they did it for humanitarian reasons. The thing is, by August, and especially by September, the war was already lost. The German generals knew it. And I think they just decided to get smart and not piss off the victors. Because it just would have been awful to no purpose. Firestorms using aerial bombing, of course, were unfortunately a feature that came over and over again, starting with the bombing in Guernica in Spain in 1937 during the Spanish Civil War. And then it occurred in a number of other German and Japanese cities during World War II. The Guernica bombings were conducted by the German Condor Legion, and they dropped 100,000 tons of bombs on the city of Guernica. They used 1/3 incendiaries and 2/3 high explosive bombs, killing 1,600 people and wounding 900. Guernica is in the Basque region of Spain, and as a former Spanish major, I can tell you from studying Spanish history, the Basques were never conquered by anyone before, including the Romans. They did give up after the bombing of Burdock. That's how devastating this was. Okay. Our next and final topic is the idea of Zeppelin air raids on New York City. I don't have any pictures of that since it didn't happen, but there is this very nice Zeppelin company advertisement that shows a Zeppelin passenger transport heading over to New York City, and the Fourth Liberty Loan poster that I told you about at the very beginning. Oh, Zeppelin raids. I have here a piece of a Zeppelin, and I'm going to pass it around. These are Zeppelins had to be strong construction but very lightweight. This is created with with an aluminum alloy called duralumin. They are because they have curved the metal, it gives it some strength, and you can feel how light this is. So I'm going to pass this around.
How old is that?
It's about a century old. It came from one of the German Zeppelins that was shot down over England, but I don't know which one. So it would have been like 1916, 1917 when it was destroyed. So I'm going to pass that around. And I'd like that back, please. Okay. Zeppelin air raids on New York City. We met Peter Strasser before, head of the German Naval Airship Division. He came up with a plan in July 1918 to attack New York City with 3 of his most modern Zeppelins. The L-70 had already been built, and they were nearly done building the L-71 and the L-72. These were amazing aircraft. They were Zeppelins, and yet they could travel at about 75 miles an hour, which is absolutely astounding.